In late June 2012, graziers converged on Monteagle Station in the Fitzroy Woodlands to see the results of spelling trials and to learn about the science and best practice for managing stocking rates and burning pasture. Paul Jones organised the field day 2 years into the spelling trials.
Today we've not only got some very old but relevant research, we've got some results of some current research, as well as some new stuff, some futuristic type blue sky modelling.
A major theme of the day was spelling.
Spelling is most important in the wet season. We can spell our country or rest it from grazing during the dry season, but it's not going to have the same impact.
Communicating the science is an important part of the spelling trials.
Getting that information out to the industry so they can take it home and work out what's useful for them back on their property.
John Burnett hosted the day. His family manage Monteagle and other properties in the Fitzroy and Burdekin catchments.
Our aim is to improve it from poor quality country into better quality grazing country, and that's been our aim since we purchased the property in 2002, and that's where Paul's come in, and this is the trial work that we're doing now to work out how we up the ante a bit further.
Paul explained the trials on Monteagle.
These plots get the wires put up or taken down to implement the spelling treatments. So we're trying to look at the duration, the timing and the frequency of spellings.
Cole Payton has 30 years experience working both in research and with graziers across northern Australia. He talked about how spelling is an investment in pasture that pays back in animal productivity.
If country's in poor condition and it's continually grazed, those plants that are not as healthy as they could be don't have a chance to get away and improve the energy in their root system and in the crown of the plant. So spelling allows those plants to capture sunlight, to photosynthesize, to store some of that energy from that process in their root system and in their crown, and to become more productive.
Paul Jones' research looks at how spelling improves land condition.
The reason this research came about was because of some of our findings out of the Grazing Systems project, that we could see the importance of spelling from that, but we didn't know a lot about it.
When they looked at other research, it didn't study the relatively short wet season spelling approach.
There's very little literature about spelling, particularly in relation to improving or maintaining land condition. A lot of grazing trials have had an area that was just locked up through the whole lot of them, but not in terms of spelling.
Some recent research compared cell grazing with planned rotation and also with more continuous grazing approaches.
The cell grazing requires a lot of intensive management and training, whereas a less intensive wet season spell may give you as much benefit as more intensive systems. Spelling's obviously going to be good for pasture. We knew there was some spelling in those continuous systems. The animals can possibly be more selective in larger paddocks and get that better diet quality advantage.
John was very involved in this research and provided one of the 9 properties where the studies were conducted.
That's the most significant factor in that. In the difference between continual grazing and the cell systems is that the management of those 3 systems was the same on each of the properties that they'd if the cell system was getting overgrazed, the cattle were moved, but if the continual grazing system was getting overgrazed, the cattle were moved as well. And I think that's probably the most significant thing that didn't show up in that work, is that the managers, because they were using the 3 different systems, the managers had actually trained themselves to monitor pasture quality.
Cole talked about how often spelling is required to recover and maintain country.
It may take spelling every summer for 3, 4, even up to 10 summers to get productivity or land condition from C condition or poor condition back to A condition or much better, excellent condition. But once it's back there, a spell every 3 or 4 years might be all that's required to keep it in good condition. Yep. And it doesn't have to be a spell for the whole summer. Giving country a spell after effective rainfall is what's essential. So by effective rainfall, I mean enough rain to allow the grass to grow plenty of good green leaf and perhaps get the seeding stage.
The trials at Monteagle raise a lot of interesting questions to fuel the ongoing research, which has another 3 years to run.
we looked at the grazing work that's been done here, spelling the pasture. We're finding very little difference between the levels or the mix of the pasture between Aristides and the more edible Forest Mitchells. Is that a destocking result? Is that a result of not using fire? Is it a result of the way the pasture was before we started? Is it a result of the seasons we're having at the moment? There's another 4 questions there that we found, looking for the answer to one question of how to improve the pasture quality. It's all there, all has to be found, and it all has to be worked on.
The attendees went through the method of assessing land condition. Knowing if your land is in A, B, C or D condition supports sound management decisions, including whether or not to spell.
What I want to do now is take you through and show you land in different condition and how you can identify that for yourselves. So here's a definition of land condition. It's the capacity of the land to respond to rain and produce useful forage. Useful forage for what? For grazing, absolutely. Not for those little hoppy things to hide under. All right. It's a measure of how well the grazing land ecosystem is working.
John takes advantage of good seasons to burn or improve pasture yield and ground cover, all of which improve land condition.
We burn some country every year, probably on about a 5 to 10 year rotation.
Yep.
Period.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Depends what sort of result we got in the fire before. But basically it's controlled by regrowth and seasons. A year like this, we'll do more burning than we normally would. Yep. Because we've got the extra bulk of grass. Uh-huh. There's 2 things we can do with that extra bulk is build up cattle numbers to eat it, or use it to manage pasture for the cattle that we run. And 8 times out of 10, the best call is to not increase cattle numbers because your season's better, but to use that grass for other reasons.
Burning is a natural part of the ecosystem, playing an important role in maintaining woody plant density, improving pasture composition to improve land condition, reducing patch grazing, and improving biodiversity.
Fire has a role, in the first place, in managing our fire hazards, and it also has a role ecologically in managing pasture composition and woodland density. And fire used properly can be very good for managing the health of our country and land condition.
Paul summarised the findings of his research and made the point that stocking rates should be set to match long-term carrying capacity.
But grazing ecosystems are very complex when you consider the processes that go on in soils, the vegetation underneath it, grazing on top of that, and then the human factor and government intervention on top of that. But that maintaining land in good condition is should be always a key business priority. Having good land condition is just a win-win situation for biodiversity and for sustainability and profitability. Stocking rates are critical and should always be matched to long-term carrying capacity. On individual years, it's important to match stocking rates to feed supply. Highly variable stocking rates, that trading operation can generate some higher profits, but it's a risky operation in terms of financial and ecological risks. Spelling is obviously going to be a good thing to maintain land in good condition, and the poorer the land condition, and probably the more frequently you're going to spell to improve land condition, especially on poorer soil types. And just highlight again the importance of photographic monitoring sites, and really encourage you to get out there and do some of them.
Tough times can leave a vivid impression which carries through into a new management approach.
In 1969, our family property at Bendemeer went through the worst dry period we had. Now, if we look at the rainfall records, it wasn't a particularly bad period. We had rain in early 68 and we had rain in late 69. What we missed was one wet season, and that was the catalyst for a major change in my thinking as a young a young fella, my thinking was feeding hay out is bloody ridiculous, and there's got to be a better way. Firstly, we've improved the quality of our pastures through our timber development. We've cleared a lot of our country so that we can grow grass when it does rain. Brigalow scrub might look very nice, but it doesn't grow feed for cattle, and we had to change that. So we did a lot of work on developing the pasture. We then maintain the quality of that pasture through spelling, through rotational grazing, through having strong plants that can survive a dry time. What we see above ground in a plant is only 2/3 of the growth of that plant. The other third is in the root system. If we keep that root system strong, we can survive the tough times a hell of a lot better. And that's been the strategy, is to keep the plant healthy, keep the root system strong, and it'll be there when we need it.
John aims to stock at 75% of long-term carrying capacity, allowing flexibility to spell, burn, and have a body of feed on hand for dry conditions.
We also have written on that sheet is at that stocking rate, what can that paddock run? Now some of those paddocks are running 140%, some are running 400%. That's fine, but if we're running 200% of what that paddock can run, we know that we'll only be running them there for 6 months. We're not going to be running them there all year round, or we're going to be overgrazing that paddock. So by just having that written down, what we assess that paddock can run, and what we assess and keep a record of what numbers are in there and how long they've been in there, we can then use that to decide whether we're overgrazing or we're not overgrazing.
John explained how spelling works for him.
Leaving the water shut off during the wet season, getting cattle away from there and sending them to the other end of the paddock. What you do is drive around and shut the gate while you're going past, and when you reckon it's right, open the gate again. And it can be 3 weeks, can make a hell of a difference. If you happen to have those cattle out of there for that 3 weeks while your grass is getting up and seeding, it doesn't make much difference to your productivity, but it makes a big difference to your long-term sustainability.
The benefits of a planned stocking rate and rotational grazing have synergy with the practicalities of property management and stock husbandry.
Okay, the spelling system, the rotation system, it's planned to a certain extent, but a lot of it happens as a natural cycle. Steve's got to get the weaners out off those cows, or you've got to brand. You do that anyway, so you bring the cows in, you brand. Instead of going back into that paddock, that's January, February, instead of going into that paddock again, you take them out of there and shift them to the next one. Both paddocks have had 6 weeks of wet season spell. The way the season's been, well, it's a lot longer than that. But by just integrating your work program into your pasture management program, it's not a separate job. It's just part of the way we run the show.
The field day was a chance for land managers to see different management approaches, catch up on current research, and find out more about ways in which spelling and stocking rate management can benefit the condition and productivity of their land.
It's definitely to reinforce what we've been doing anyway, but to know that it's the right thing to be doing, yes.
About the fire management practices, we certainly need to burn more than we ever have in the past.
With the rotational grazing and that sort of thing, it was all ideas that we've incorporated, so it's good to see the science is backing up what we've been doing.
I'd like to see more people attend days like this, because I think they're the ones who are missing out.